Hello everyone and welcome to another Dead by Daylight video. Today I'm going to be making a tier list video for Chapter 13, the Stranger Things DLC chapter. I'm going to be ranking the killers in a tier list according to what I believe is their potential kill ability. The rankings are simply going to be what I believe and my personal opinion and experiences have led me to put them in these categories. Unlike other tier lists, I only have 4 categories. That's the S tier, that's the top tier, these are the best killers. The A class, high tier, these are killers that are very good. They're not quite S tier, they just don't have everything they need to be, top tier killers. The B tier, which is the low tier, these are killers that are subpar. They're not going to be some of the best that you're going to find in high rank play. They still need some work to be done, and that's why they can't quite make it up into the A tier. And then there's the bottom tier, the C tier, where these killers are just, they have a lot of problems going on with them. You're not going to see them very much because their powers are really just subpar, and their ability to kill survivors is, in my opinion, subpar. Now, because I only have 4 tiers, I will let you know if somebody is like, a borderline higher tier or lower tier. And as I place them on my board here, I'm going to be placing them in the order that I believe that they belong in their tier. Also, I'm going to be going from where they appear in the killer select screen, so that's, Trapper first, Demagoguing last, in order of release, essentially. Now that we've got that out of the way, you guys know how I'm ranking my killers. Let's get into it and let's see where your favorite killer ends up. First up on the chopping block is Trapper. Trapper's long setup time, limited inventory, and constant need to reset his traps or go find more traps gives him just about as much to do as the survivors with getting generators done and healing, in my opinion. It's also very unlikely to trap survivors except at low ranks or mid ranks where players aren't as aware of their surroundings. Coordinated survivors will be aware of your traps and will disarm them strategically to slow your progress or alter your priorities mid-match. He's far too dependent on keeping his traps and his inventory up and available to be anything more than a really B-tier killer. However, survivors have to be wary about his traps enough to watch for them, and clever use of his traps can sometimes surprise even really experienced survivors. They make safe loops more dangerous, which helps him in the long game, but his early and late game are two very large areas where he suffers, even when played optimally. So we're going to be taking the Trapper, and we're going to be putting him in B tier, and in my opinion, he is probably the second worst in the B tier. So there you go, Trapper. Next up is Wraith. Wraith's ability lets him move across the map and close the distance in a chase, but he's an M1 killer with nothing beyond slightly stealthy movement. And when I say slightly stealthy, I mean if you are just paying decent attention, you can see a shimmer coming from a mile away. It's invisible to the people who aren't used to seeing it, but it's plain as day for anybody who's played the game any decent amount of time. His problems are that coming out of his stealth slows him down, and going into his stealth slows him down. So it's giving the survivors 2 chances to run. I should also mention that we're not judging killers based on their add-ons or perk availability or anything like that. It's just their base kit. And that's why Wraith is going to be going into the C tier, bottom tier for me. If you aren't good at chases with him, Wraith is going to fail hard. He's just far too perk and add-on reliant to be anything of a good killer. However, he is the top of the C tier, but he's not even borderline, in my opinion. He's not even a borderline B tier. He needs some work to even be a B tier killer. After Wraith, we have the Hillbilly. Hillbilly is going to be going in the A tier. He's a high tier killer. He has 2 things going for him: good movement and an insta-down. However, his ability at any range other than melee is predictable and can be dodged by an observant survivor. He relies heavily on his chainsaw as the only trick in his bag, and survivors know this. He's a low A tier, borderline B tier killer who is deadly but predictable. His ability helps with map pressure and to quickly end safe loops, and by that I don't mean he can help mind game loops or catch up with survivors. I mean that he can just get rid of a pallet that makes a loop safe quickly if it's dropped. But if he didn't have the map pressure to go across the map quickly or to chop the pallets down quickly, he would drop in tiers hard. He's an overrated killer. Against good survivors, Hillbilly is a B tier, maybe a C tier. Against new survivors, he's a borderline S tier because they're just not used to him. Billy is an A tier, but he's the absolute bottom of the barrel when it comes to A tier. Next up is the Nurse. Nurse is, of course, going into S tier. The Nurse's blinks allow for fast movement and extremely short chases. A good nurse is a god, but a bad nurse is a joke. That's because she is an extremely skill-based killer where time and effort will make her an absolute nightmare for survivors of any rank. Her blinks get her where she needs to be quickly, and even without add-ons or perks, she still remains the most efficiently lethal killer in the game right now. She simply ignores like 95% of all mind games and standard chase tactics. The best nurse players only ever need 2 blinks to start and end a chase. She does have a rework coming in which it's supposed to slightly alter her base kit and completely rework her add-ons. So we'll see if she keeps her record holding place in the S tier after that, or if she'll become an A tier killer. Next up is the Huntress. The Huntress is going to be an A tier killer. Her lack of movement ability means she has a little in the way of map pressure, but a skillful Huntress can be a nightmare from range. A skilled Huntress can ignore basically 80% of normal chase tactics by utilizing her hatchets in combination with her speed and melee strikes. And when I say speed, I mean she's one of the fastest base speed killers in the game, but she has no actual ability to get across the map and do things. She's a highly respected killer by most survivors, and her reputation as one of the most solid A-tier killers is very well earned. Hitboxes and ping can make or break her at times, but she's an extremely deadly killer in the right hands with like surgical long-distance strikes if somebody's practiced with her a lot. She's not going to be the top of the A-tier, but she's still very respected. She's going to come in at 4th in the A tier. After the Huntress, we have Michael Myers. Michael Myers, to me, is a B tier killer. Michael's problems is that he really has no map pressure, and he's heavily reliant on timing his ability to make games work in his favor. He's also very reliant on survivors screwing up during his ability going off to work in his favor. A halfway observant player can nullify him by crouching behind stuff or utilizing line of sight to stop him from charging up evil within. But careful movement and placement on Michael's part can pay dividends. He just has to be able to, maneuver around the map in ways that survivors don't expect in order to be able to stalk survivors and charge up his evil within. Tier 3 can be deadly if you play it right, but his main add-ons are for gimmick builds mostly, which makes him a lower tier killer in my opinion. He is very add-on and perk dependent, but still deadly with only rewards coming from the use of his power and no real punishment. Michael is, like I said, a B tier, but he's mid B tier. He's not the best of the B tier, but he's not the worst either, so he's going into the middle. Next up, we have Hag. Hag is an A tier killer. She's an extremely high A tier killer, in my opinion, borderline S tier. She's extremely underrated, and the only thing holding her back from being S tier is flashlights being able to get rid of her traps, which I personally don't think should be a thing. No other killer can have their entire power nullified by an object that the survivors can bring into the game. She's able to teleport, set up traps mid-chase to cut off loops, slow survivors when hooking or moving toward generators. The ability to punish vaults and altruism makes her a force to be reckoned with, just because of the way she can set up her traps to do all this stuff. She isn't a killer to be taken lightly, and her mind game with setting traps one way at the start of the match and then swapping up the placements later in the match helps her keep survivors guessing the entire time. So, in my personal opinion, Hag is very high tier. She's right up there with the S tiers, but she's not quite there just because of that flashlight gimmick thing that should not be in her kit. So she's at the top of the A tier for me. After the Hag comes the Doctor, and the Doctor is a B tier killer. The ability to find survivors the moment your terror radius hits them at the beginning of the match is great. Well-timed shocks can prevent unhooks, vaults, or pallet throws. His madness can make skill checks tricky, but not impossible, especially at high-level gameplay. People are going to hit those skill checks no matter what. You really have to stack the perks to make them super difficult for max level players. The Doctor is a high B tier, almost A tier killer. 1 or 2 tweaks can make him an A tier. His awareness is wonderful, with everybody screaming and you getting the visions of the fake doctors and stuff around, but that doesn't actively help him in his chases. It also doesn't help that whenever he switches modes, it slows him down a bit. And when he charges his shock, it slows him down a bit. That's never going to help in a chase. So the Doctor is a B tier killer. However, I personally think, like I said, he's borderline A tier with just a few tweaks. So he's at the very tippity top of the B tier. After that, we come to everybody's favorite cannibal. It's time for Bubba. Leatherface is a C-tier killer, and there's no surprise here. This one was not going to be a surprise for anybody. No killer in the game is punished more than Leatherface for using his power. Revving his chainsaw slows him down. Using the chainsaw only brings him back to his regular speed, and if you hit an object, you go into a quasi-stun, where you throw that little fit and you're slowed down. So unless you're out in the open, or you're sure you won't hit an object, Leatherface doesn't use his chainsaw except to break pallets. He's the absolute definition of an M1 killer. He needs so much help. At low ranks, he can be a nightmare for new survivors, but at high ranks, people mostly just laugh at him. But Leatherface is the bottom of the bottom right now, in my opinion, so he's going into C tier, and he is probably going to stay there for a long while until he gets some attention. After Leatherface, we come to Freddy. Freddy, in my opinion, is absolute S tier after his rework. He has gone from the worst of the worst to among the best of the best. His gen pressure is second to none with his ability to teleport to generators, and his snares make loops a thing of the past. No loop is infinite with Freddy now. His weakness really lies in the end game, if the end game even gets there, since he can't teleport to generators after 5 have been completed, but it's rare for Freddy to get to that point from what I've seen. He has fantastic mind games with his snares. He has great chase abilities now to prevent fast vaults, to slow people down on loops. He makes the killer shack just something you're not want to have to be around. His map pressure by being able to teleport to generators even mid-chase is incredible. Everything you could want in a killer, really. He stepped his game up after his rework. Freddy, for me, is S tier, and he's about midway through the S tier. He's very strong, very, very strong after his rework. So, congratulations, Freddy. It's good to have you up at the top, especially after so long. So long near the bottom. Next up is the Pig, another DLC character. There's a lot of DLC characters in a row there. Pig, for me, in my opinion, is a B-tier killer. Her stealth isn't immediate, like Ghostface's, but she also can't be broken out of it. Thank God for her DLC outfits now, which you can use to make her blend into the dark maps more without having her be a bright red beacon in the gloom. You can see her coming from a mile away like that. Her charge can help with mind gaming loops, which is good, but it's signaled too soon. Be as good as of a tool in her arsenal as it could be. Her traps do help to waste the survivor's time, but aren't that big of a threat once you realize how they work and how much time you actually have to get them off. Just a couple tweaks here and there. She could easily be A tier, possibly S tier. Her traps, if they tweak them right, could really put her on that border A-S tier, but she's not quite there. She's just B tier for me, but she's high B tier. She's really close. Like I said, they really just need to work on a few things with her, and she would be golden. Next up after Pig is the Clown. Clown is also a B-tier killer. Clown can make loops dangerous with a good throw from his bottles, and that's about it. He doesn't really have any more tricks up his sleeve. He can make loops dangerous, but not impossible. However, since this is enough to actually lock off safe routes and herd survivors in the direction you want them to go from a decent range, the Clown makes for an underrated killer who should be respected more than he is. His problem comes from his lack of actual mobility and map pressure. He can kill mind games before they happen, so that keeps him out of the C tier, but he has no real way to apply pressure to the map, which keeps him out of the A or S tier for me. He is a B tier. He's not all the way up, with Pig or Doctor, but he's not as bad off as Trapper. So Clown comes in just past Myers. He's midway in the B tier for me. After Clown comes everybody's favorite homicidal Japanese ghost, the Spirit. The Spirit is, of course, and nobody's going to be surprised by this, an S-tier killer. Spirit is really what every killer should aspire to be in a base kit, along with every other S-tier killer, really. A solid mobility with the ability to track survivors and mind game them with very simple but strategic applications of her abilities makes her a great killer. She can fake loops and vaults, appear at gens without warning, and catch survivors unaware that way. She is another skill-based killer like the Nurse, where player skill has just as much to do with her kit as the abilities and powers for themselves. Spirit games are always tense and put a survivor's chase ability to the test, but I think that's what Dead by Daylight should be. You should be scared of the killer, and that's what I think S-tier killers bring to the game. A frightening experience, even at high ranks. She is right up there with the best of the best, top tier killers right there. Okay, now after Spirit, we have to talk about the big elephant in the room. Everybody's hated emo killer, Legion. And Legion, for me, is a B-tier killer. Legion is in a really weird space right now in between nerfs, a weird neutralization of his abilities, and a promised rework further down the road. He's a nightmare for new players and an annoyance mostly for experienced players. His abilities make chases awkward for himself because you either have to use your power to hit a survivor then find another survivor, or not use your power and commit to downing the person you're chasing. Mixing the two slows you down and gives survivors time to get away. So I'm placing him in B tier since he can't really mix turning his power on and off without using his power to punish himself. He's actually at the bottom of the B tier. He's almost borderline C tier. But because he can force survivors to waste their time with mending, he's B tier. He can slow the game down with just his abilities, but his abilities aren't enough to really do much. He can't apply much map pressure. He can mostly just apply pressure to the survivors themselves. Next we have the Plague. Plague for me is an A tier killer. She's another borderline S tier killer with one or two changes that would help give her that jump into S tier. Her power really forces survivors to choose between staying in the broken one-shot state or allowing the Plague to become more powerful. And survivors make plenty of noise while sick, so that helps in chases if you pay attention. And her ability to hit survivors over vaults and objects is helpful as well with either Vile Purge or Corrupt Purge. Survivors are constantly threatened with her, constantly giving away their position, and never stay safe during chases or even outside of a chase with the Plague. She is a fantastic, nearly S-tier killer. She's just about everything you could want. Tons of map pressure just by vomiting on things and keeping the survivors in a broken state all on their own. Excellent killer. I placed her in the A tier. She's at the very tip top of the A tier, along with the Hag, in my opinion. We're getting down to it. After the Plague comes Ghostface, and for me, Ghostface is an A tier killer. He's not quite S tier, but he is a very solid A tier killer. He is unarguably the best stealth killer in the game. Where Myers can only get to insta-down status over time for a short amount of time, Ghostface can do it in seconds. Where Pig can go stealthy, it doesn't happen right away. Where Ghostface is immediate. And while Wraith is in stealth mode, he'll never know if someone sees him, while breaking Ghostface stealth comes with him getting to know where you are. He mixes the strength and weaknesses of every stealth killer into a hyper-lethal package. While he can end chases before they begun, he can also become a pure M1 killer in a chase once his stealth is broken. This is what keeps him out of S tier for me. That and his lack of pressure over the entire map. He is a killer that forces survivors to play in a different way, where they can't actually look at him without giving away their position, so that's something that's very unique to him, and something that survivors have to keep in mind and also stay on edge for. But like I said, he is an A tier, high tier killer, very middle of the pack. He's close. He's not quite S tier, but he's giving the others in the mostly Huntress and Hillbilly a very big run for their money when it comes to the A tier. And now for Chapter 13, Stranger Things DLC Final Killer, the Demagoguing. This is coming out the day of his balance patch, so that his shred ability has the baked-in ability to break pallets when he hits them. Because of that, his update makes him the newest S-tier killer for me, though he is the lowest in the S-tier. He's borderline A-tier. In fact, he would be behind Hag if flashlights didn't trump her powers. However, his ability to choose where he teleports to by placing his portals in strategic locations, check survivor locations by using his portals as tracking devices, guard generators and totems with them, and exit doors, get mind game chases by threatening his shred ability, close gaps in chases with his shred ability, destroy pallets, really just cut off what would normally be a safe escape for a survivor in jungle gyms. All of these just put him leagues above most other killers. He's definitely an S-tier killer. That's a lot of map pressure by being able to choose where you want to be able to teleport, to be able to end mind-gameable loops with a single shred. Even if you don't hit the survivor, you're not far away from them now. You're much closer than other killers would be. You can destroy pallets just like Hillbilly and Leatherface. He's a fantastic new killer. I think he was very balanced when they released him. He's much more dangerous now that he can just break pallets right away. They were right to change that, I think. Demagoguing is the newest killer in the S tier. He's made it to the top spots right out of the bat. I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, this is my entire tier list right now as of Chapter 13, September 2019. Eventually I might do a series where we look at killers and say, what can we do to fix these killers and put them into, if not S tier, into A tier. You know, make them more dangerous, make them scarier, make them more viable. But that's it for my tier list. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. I'm curious to know why. Like I said, these are based on my experiences. They're obviously not set in stone for anybody because everybody plays differently. Everybody encounters things differently. Consoles will have a different tier list. People in the UK will have a different tier list because I'm in the North American servers. But yeah, I'd love to hear your feedback. I'd love to hear if you agree with some of my choices. I'd love to see what you think about everything in general. Thank you for watching the video. If you've come this far, if you liked it, please feel free to give it a like. If you didn't, please give it a dislike and let me know in the comments why you disliked it. I need the feedback if I'm going to improve my channel. I hope you all have a great day, and as always, stay positive.